All right, so who is better, Mystique, Rebecca Romaine Stamos, or Jennifer Lawrence? Okay, this was answered really well by Dario. I don't know how to pronounce that last part, but I think that Jennifer Lawrence was a much better Mystique because she was more dynamic in terms of her character. Rebecca Romaine Stamos was a great Mystique for a character that didn't really have any lines, that didn't really talk. She wasn't very dynamic. She was really kind of there as a support character. As a leading role character, I felt like Jennifer Lawrence did much better because Jennifer Lawrence was able to bring a whole new kind of dynamic. She brought a lot of personality, and we really kind of saw the struggle that her character was going through as she was really kind of going through this internal debate between whose philosophies were right. The philosophy of Magneto, in the sense that mutants need to strike first while the iron's hot so they don't end up with a Days of Future Past kind of scenario, or Charles Xavier, who has this peaceful coexistence kind of ideology between humans and mutants. Now, ultimately, of course, she sides with Xavier and chooses not to assassinate the president, but I'm sorry, choose not to assassinate Bolivar Trask. But in the end, I think that Jennifer Lawrence was a much better Mystique. And in addition to the fact that Jennifer Lawrence is my homegirl, so I'm always going to side with Jennifer Lawrence when it comes to a question like that. Cameron, oh my God, Cameron, you got like 5 different questions. Okay. When and how did the mutant sending Wolverine back in time develop such powers? Okay, so it's obvious at this point that Kitty Pryde was the one that sent Wolverine's mind into the past. As far as I understand it, it's not really explained outright. I think it has something to do with her phase shifting abilities and the fact that Bishop can travel through time, but Bishop didn't have the inherent ability to travel through time. Bishop had the ability to travel through time due to technology from his time period. So it's really kind of interesting here. They don't really come out and say, her phase shifting abilities grant her the ability to send people through time. They really kind of say, well, it's really kind of her ability to phase and send people into the past by sending their consciousness. And that's really the only explanation that we get. When they're explaining it, when Charles Xavier is explaining it, Kitty Pryde is talking about how she can send the consciousness of a person into the past by a couple days, but their mind really can't handle the stress, and their mind ends up cracking and shutting down, if they can't go back any further. So it's really kind of weird the way they explain it, but it's not really in depth. I think they could have done a better job of explaining that, but I felt like it was kind of like, all right, we just need a really quick, easy explanation to how it is that Wolverine's going to go back in time using the powers of Kitty Pryde, and that's that, and no one's going to question it, because who cares? So I'm not really sure what the logic was behind their choice to have Kitty Pryde send him into the past. Let's see. At some point, we hear a familiar major name who turns out to be someone else. Please explain why it is that someone else. All right, I'm not really sure what Cameron's referring to here. Angel, maybe, but maybe he's talking about the character Angel, who has the same name in the Marvel comics, but he's not talking about Warren Worthington III. So maybe that's what he's referring to. That maybe he's referring to Warren Worthington III, but it actually turns out that it's Angel, the girl, and that would make sense because we saw Warren Worthington in X-Men Last Stand, and the movies this one really kind of retcons X-Men Last Stand, but I guess maybe it was kind of a throw out to say, hey, we still acknowledge the fact that Archangel is still a part of the Fox movie franchise. We just really haven't had him in a movie since X-Men Last Stand. I'm not really sure what it is that Cameron's referring to here. To which extent should people disregard The Last Stand, considering Professor X is alive, but others who died in the movie aren't? Okay, so we haven't really got an explanation like that, or haven't gotten an explanation on that. When the Days of Future Past, when Wolverine is successful in preventing the assassination of Bolivar Trask, it really retcons everything in X-Men Last Stand. So Jean Grey, as far as I can tell, hasn't really been touched by the Phoenix Force yet. She may very well have, but I don't think that she has actually been touched by the Phoenix Force. She looks the way she did, in the sense that her hair is a very, very dark auburn color, but she, there was no semblance of like a fire in her eyes or anything to indicate to us, aside from maybe the similar appearances, that she had been touched by the Phoenix Force. In addition, Cyclops is alive, and of course Professor X is alive. So in X-Men Last Stand, they had been killed off. So as far as I understand it, by keeping the assassination of Bolivar Trask happening, really everything that took place in X-Men Last Stand doesn't count anymore. So everything that happened after X-Men X2 is non-existent. So you can pretty much just cancel everything that you saw in X-Men Last Stand. Now, whether or not that means that Leech, who was the child who was able to nullify powers, whether or not that means that he simply won't make an appearance or he doesn't exist at all or anything like that, we don't really know. I mean, this was really they really kind of told us that X-Men Last Stand didn't count anymore over the span of, a 3 or 4 minute kind of montage scene as we were introduced to the fact that some of the characters that died in X-Men Last Stand were brought back to life. In the movie The Wolverine, we see Logan get his old claws back, but in Days of Future Past, the metal claws are back. What's the continuity there? All right, as I understand it, it was simply his mind that was sent into the past. And so Wolverine's mind from the future was sent into his past body. And so that was before he met William Stryker. And that was before William Stryker had bonded the adamantium to his body. And so at this point in time, he still had bone claws. That really seems to be the continuity that's going on. That really seems to be the explanation to me, just because of the fact that in terms of his physical appearance, he's his younger self. He doesn't have gray along the side of his head or anything like that. So I'm pretty sure that's what was going on in terms of the continuity. Rob, I pretty much know who's at the end after the credits. Why does he look the way he does? So not powerful. And also, did the events that occur deviate everything from what happened originally through the series? Like a reboot of some kind. Okay, so we just explained that in terms of Last Stand. So everything that took place in X-Men 1 and X-Men 2 apparently has still taken place. But everything that took place in X-Men Last Stand doesn't count anymore. In addition, I'm assuming that we're just seeing a younger version of Apocalypse. That's really just kind of my thought here. Again, it was a post-credit scene. It was a minute and a half long, and really all we heard in terms of talk was a group chanting in Sabah Nur. So we have no idea what the context is here. We have no earthly clue what's going on. I would say, given the time period, it's just a young version of Apocalypse, and he hasn't quite grown into adulthood yet or anything. Who was the guy with the knife and the red paint over his eyes? Yeah, that's Warpath. That's James Proudstar, the son, or I guess the younger brother of John Proudstar, who was Thunderbird, one of the original X-Men as part of Giant Size X-Men. What are your thoughts on the lack of Stan Lee in this movie? To me, it doesn't really matter. I'm not really a stickler for Stan Lee appearing in Marvel films. I mean, I don't care really that he didn't appear. It doesn't really matter to me, because his appearances are really just kind of like, hey, I'm Stan Lee, just letting you guys know that me and Jack Kirby were the ones that created all this stuff, I'm actually really kind of glad to see that Chris Claremont appeared in the movie, because Chris Claremont was the writer of the Days of Future Past. And here's the thing to bear in mind. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby started the X-Men, but Chris Claremont revolutionized the X-Men. And the X-Men that you guys are most familiar with, the X-Men that you guys are most likely thinking of when you think of X-Men in the comics, you're thinking of Chris Claremont's X-Men. And so Chris Claremont is really kind of the quintessential X-Men writer. And almost anyone who's a fan of X-Men will tell you that Chris Claremont wrote some of the best stories involving the X-Men. So I was really more happy to see that Chris Claremont appeared than Stan Lee. And I think that was intentional, especially because, like we said, Chris Claremont was the one who wrote the Days of Future Past story. Let's see. Do you think Quicksilver should have been included in the movie more? I think his role in the movie was about right. He was really kind of a supporting character. I feel like if he had appeared any more than he did, it would have just kind of been Quicksilver being shoved in our faces. It really wouldn't have been interesting. For the purpose that he served, for the role that he played, it was just perfect for him. He was really just an assistant to help get Magneto out of jail, or out of the prison that he was being held in the center of the Pentagon. I don't think that he really needed to have any more of a role than that. Let's see. It basically erased all of the previous ones. Do you think that was a good idea? Yeah. X-Men Last Stand was terrible. That was a horrible movie. It was one of the worst movies I've seen in a long time, and it really destroyed, for the most part, my faith in Fox being able to make a good Marvel-based film. Now, this movie kind of restored that a little bit. I mean, of course, I'll always side with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, just because you have the creators of comic books making their own movies. So, it would be like me, as a t-shirt maker being contracted to make wooden tables. I make t-shirts. Why would I make wooden tables? Now, if you come to me and say, Rob, I want you to make a t-shirt, I'll make the best t-shirt you've ever seen. But but I have no business making wooden tables. That's really kind of what's going on here. Marvel makes comic books, and they're making movies about the comics they make. It really, kind of stands to reason to me that they would do a much better job than Fox. But nonetheless, I'm kind of digressing here. Yes, I think it was a good idea that X-Men Last Stand was canceled, because now we see characters like Beast coming back, and we can really kind of change everything. We can really kind of set a whole new path for these characters, and we don't have to worry about X-Men Last Stand kind of getting in the way.